Imagine a young man sitting alone in complete darkness. No roof above his head, no fire keeping him warm, no mother bringing him food, no father telling him what to do next. Just cold wind, unknown sounds in the distance, and a girl sitting beside him who believed in him enough to leave everything behind. This is not a movie. This is not a punishment. This is simply what happened the day he chose love over his tribe. And tonight, everything he had ever known was gone forever. To understand what happened to him, you have to go back, way back, before cities, before governments, before wedding halls and marriage certificates and angry aunties giving unsolicited advice at family dinners. Back to a time when humans lived in small groups of maybe 30 to 50 people. Everyone knew everyone. Every decision affected the entire group. And marriage was never, not even once, a private matter between two people. Marriage was a survival strategy. When ancient humans arranged their children's marriages, they were not being romantic. They were being strategic. A marriage between two young people meant a connection between two families, two groups, two survival networks. It meant shared hunting grounds. It meant more protection during raids. It meant more hands to gather food during winter. Love had nothing to do with it. Resources had everything to do with it. So when a young man inside an ancient tribe looked across the camp and felt something strange in his chest for a girl his parents had not chosen, he was not just breaking a rule. He was threatening the entire system his family had built their survival around. And ancient parents did not take that quietly. Now here is where the story gets interesting. The young man had been watching her for weeks. She was from a neighboring group that occasionally shared the same hunting ground. She laughed differently from the girls in his tribe. She carried herself with a kind of quiet confidence that made him forget what he was supposed to be doing. And she had noticed him too. They had spoken near the river twice, 3 times, then more than either of them could count. And slowly, without planning it, without intending it, something had grown between them that neither of them could explain or stop. He made a decision that would change everything. He told his father. The silence that followed was not the silence of a man thinking. It was the silence of a man trying to control something building inside him that wanted to erupt. His father had already spoken to another family. Arrangements had been made. A girl from a trusted group had been selected carefully. Her family brought resources. Her father was a skilled hunter whose alliance meant everything. This girl his son had chosen brought none of that. She was from a smaller group. Her family offered no strategic advantage. And worse than all of that, his son had chosen her himself, which meant his son had decided that his own feelings were more important than the survival of the family. In ancient tribes, that was not just disrespectful, that was dangerous thinking. His mother reacted differently but equally as devastated. She did not shout. She simply went quiet in a way that felt worse than any shouting. She stopped including him in meals the way she used to. She stopped asking him about his day. She moved around him like he was already gone. And in ancient social dynamics, that silent withdrawal from a mother was one of the most powerful punishments a tribe could deliver without saying a single word. The pressure mounted for days, then weeks. The tribe noticed. Elders exchanged looks. Other families began distancing themselves slightly. The young man was becoming a social problem. And in a tribe of 50 people, a social problem affected everyone. Then came the night everything ended. His father called him outside the shelter after the fire had burned low. The conversation was short. His father did not beg. He did not negotiate. He pointed toward the darkness beyond the camp and said something that translated across every language and every era of human history into the same devastating meaning. You made your choice. Now live with it. And just like that, the shelter that had been his entire world since the moment he was born was no longer his. He walked back inside, gathered the few things he owned, and went to find her. She was already waiting. She had expected this. Her own family had reacted the same way 2 days earlier. They stood together at the edge of the camp, 2 people with almost nothing, looking out into a world that suddenly felt enormous and indifferent and terrifyingly quiet. And then they walked into it. The first night was the hardest thing either of them had ever experienced. They had no shelter. Building even a basic structure took knowledge, tools, and time. They found a cluster of large rocks that blocked some of the wind and huddled together for warmth. Every sound from the darkness made them both go completely still. Wolves were not just a figure of speech in this world. They were a real and present danger every single night. He had hunted before, but always with other men, always with the safety of numbers and shared knowledge around him. Alone, hunting was a completely different calculation. She had gathered food before, but always knowing exactly which plants were safe in which season, guided by older women who had spent decades learning the landscape. Now she was in unfamiliar territory with no one to ask. The first week they ate badly, not enough protein, wrong combinations of plants that left their stomachs angry and unsatisfied. They were exhausted from building a basic shelter out of branches and large leaves that let wind through in 3 places and collapsed twice before it held. But here is the thing that nobody tells you about ancient humans who were pushed out of their tribes. They did not fall apart. They adapted because both of them had grown up in an environment where adaptation was not a philosophy. It was a daily survival requirement. He discovered that hunting alone required completely different techniques, slower, more patient, more dependent on reading animal behavior than on group coordination. He became better at it than he expected. She discovered that in this new territory there were plants she had never seen before. She spent careful days testing them in tiny amounts, watching her body's reaction, building knowledge that no one had given her but that she was generating herself from scratch. They built a better shelter the third time, lower to the ground, better insulated, with a small fire pit positioned to reflect heat back toward where they slept. It was not perfect, but it kept them alive through nights that would have killed them a month earlier. Shared survival creates a bond that no arranged alliance can manufacture. Every night they kept each other alive. Every morning they woke up and made decisions together. Every small success, a good hunt, a warm night, a shelter that held against rain became something they had built together from nothing. And that kind of bond does not break easily. Meanwhile, back in the tribe, something complicated was happening. His mother had stopped eating well, not dramatically, not in a way anyone would point to directly, but the elders noticed she seemed quieter than usual. His father continued his daily routines with the rigid discipline of a man who had made a decision and refused to question it. But at night, when the camp was quiet and the fire was low, he sat longer than he needed to, looking at nothing, thinking about something he would never say out loud. The tribe had an unspoken rule about these situations. Once someone was sent away, you did not chase after them. You did not check on them. To do so would be to admit that the punishment had been wrong. And ancient parents, like parents across every era of human history, found it almost impossible to admit they had been wrong. Months passed, then seasons. The young couple had a child. This changed everything in ways neither of them had fully anticipated. A child required more than two people could comfortably provide alone. More food, more protection, more constant attention. The sleepless nights were different from exhaustion because there was no grandmother to hand the baby to for 2 hours of rest. There was no aunt who knew exactly what to do when the baby cried in a specific way that neither parent could interpret. They figured it out, slowly and imperfectly and sometimes desperately, but they figured it out together. And in doing so, they became something that most people in their original tribes never became: completely self-reliant. The ancient world occasionally allowed for reconciliation. Not always, not easily, but sometimes a parent's silence broke before their pride did. Sometimes a mother found a reason to travel near the area where her son had been seen. Sometimes a father came hunting alone in territory that happened to overlap with where his child was building a life. These meetings were never dramatic in the way stories make them sound. They were quiet, awkward, full of unsaid things on both sides, but they happened. And when a grandchild was involved, they happened more frequently than ancient pride would ever officially admit. Because something about seeing the continuation of yourself in a small face that carries your features makes arguments about strategy and alliance feel very small and very far away. What ancient humans who rejected love marriages never understood was that the couples they pushed out were not weakened by the exile. They were forged by it. The ones who survived built something that strategic marriages rarely produced: a partnership, a real one, built not on family agreements and resource calculation, but on the specific knowledge that this one person beside you chose you when choosing you cost them everything, and you chose them back for exactly the same reason. Tonight, somewhere in the world, a young couple is sitting together in a small apartment with not enough money and too many problems in families who still have not fully accepted what they chose. And they probably do not realize that what they are living through is not a modern crisis or a cultural failure or a sign that they made the wrong decision. It is the oldest story in human history. Two people who chose each other over everything else and then had to build everything else from scratch. The ancient ones who survived it became the strongest members of the next generation. The question was never whether love was practical. The question was always whether you were strong enough to make it practical yourself. Some were, and the ones who were changed everything that came after them.